Right after they lowered Marjorie's coffin into the earth, my son leaned over and whispered, "Hand me the keys now, Dad." No tremble in his voice. No hesitation. Just those words, cold and rehearsed. I turned to look at him, thinking maybe I misheard. But he stared straight ahead like I was just a formality to get through. We were still at the cemetery. My wife, his mother, hadn't even been gone an hour. And all he could think about was the house. Our house. The one I built for her. I didn't say a word. Not yet. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I still remember the day I laid the first brick of that house. It was the spring of 1979, and Marjorie stood there in the middle of that empty plot, holding a thermos of sweet tea and laughing because I'd already ruined 2 shirts just digging the foundation. We didn't have much back then, just a beat-up pickup, a few $100s in the bank, and a baby on the way. But we had each other. And for me, that was everything. Marjorie believed in building things that lasted, not just homes, but relationships, trust, family. She was the kind of woman who remembered every neighbor's birthday and always baked 2 extra pies for the church bake sale. I was the quieter one. Worked with my hands. Spoke when I had something to say. But I worshipped the ground she walked on. We had Jordan 6 months after the house was framed. He was a screamer from the start, but when Marjorie held him, he quieted. I used to say she had magic in her bones, and I still believe that. I worked as a carpenter most of my life, fixing other people's homes while slowly perfecting our own. Every paycheck went to essentials, college savings, or improving the house. I turned the attic into a study when Jordan turned 7, built a porch swing when Marjorie mentioned loving the ones in Southern novels. We didn't go on fancy vacations. We didn't have new cars. But we had a beautiful life. Jordan was a bright kid. Quick with his hands and quicker with his words. He loved baseball, comic books, and asking questions, about everything. Why do clouds float? How do nails hold wood together? Do you think I'll be strong like you, Dad? I told him strength wasn't just muscles. It was how you carried people when they needed you. We had traditions. Every Sunday, we grilled in the backyard, even in the winter, bundled up like fools. Every October, we'd rake leaves and make the biggest pile just so Jordan could jump in. He and Marjorie would team up to beat me at Monopoly, always grinning like bandits. And every night, without fail, I'd kiss her goodnight and whisper, "You're my home." I taught Jordan everything I knew. How to hold a hammer, how to read blueprints, how to sand a floor just right. He built his first birdhouse when he was 10. At 14, he helped me retile the kitchen floor. He used to say, "One day I'll take care of this place, Dad. Don't worry." I believed him. Marjorie and I never pressured him. We wanted him to chase his dreams. When he said he wanted to study business, we nodded and paid for every class. When he moved out for college, I remember how quiet the house felt. Like the walls themselves missed him. Marjorie cried the day he brought Danielle home. I'll admit, I was slower to warm up. Danielle was sharp. Not rude, not at first. Just particular. Polished in a way that made our mismatched mugs and threadbare cushions seem embarrassing. She complimented the house with phrases like, quaint, and cozy, the way realtors talk about fixer-uppers. But Jordan loved her, so we did too, or tried. Marjorie, more than me, made the effort. She'd make Danielle's favorite lemon tarts, ask about her work, invite her to help in the garden. Sometimes she'd return to the kitchen looking deflated, but she never said a bad word about her. After they got married, they didn't visit as often. Jordan said work kept them busy. Then came the excuses. The drive's long. Danielle's got a migraine. We'll come next month. Marjorie always believed them. She'd keep his room spotless, just in case he surprised us. Every holiday she set the table for 3, then 4 after their daughter, Emily, was born. Emily was our light. A bright, curious girl with Marjorie's warmth and a laugh that made you forget your troubles. For a while, their visits became more regular, mostly to drop Emily off so they could get some things done. We never minded. Those were the best weekends of our later years. Teaching her to bake, to plant tomatoes, to name the birds in the backyard. But time has a way of pulling people in different directions. After a while, even Emily stopped coming. They said she had dance, tutors, other plans. I saw the look in Marjorie's eyes, though. A mixture of acceptance and something else. Something sadder. Still, we never spoke ill of them. Not once. Not even when they forgot birthdays. Not even when they came late to our anniversary dinner and left early. We told ourselves they were busy. That they'd come around. That love, surely, was stronger than distance. Looking back, I wonder if we were naive. If we ignored the signs because we didn't want to admit the truth, that our son had changed, or maybe that we never truly knew who he'd become. But in those early years, before the tension crept in, life was beautiful. It was a time of Sunday laughter, handwritten cards, and hands that built not just walls but memories. I still see Marjorie in every corner of that house, in the way the sunlight hit the kitchen tiles we chose together, in the creak of the third stair that only she ever managed to skip. We built more than a home. We built a life, full of love, sacrifice, and moments so gentle they could break your heart now. That's what made it all so hard to believe when it started to unravel. It didn't happen all at once. That's the cruel part. If it had, maybe I would have seen it for what it was. But it came in small ways, like water wearing down stone. The first time I noticed something was off, Jordan was in his early 30s. He and Danielle had just moved into a newer place, big, modern, with a kitchen island and recessed lighting, the whole thing right out of a catalog. We visited once. Danielle gave us a tour like a realtor, walking a step ahead of Jordan the whole time. "We're thinking of hosting Christmas here next year," she said, barely glancing at us. When we got back in the car, Marjorie smiled, but her hands were folded tightly in her lap. "Do you think she didn't like the quilt I brought?" she asked me. "It didn't match her color scheme," I mumbled. She looked out the window the rest of the drive. Still, we made excuses. They were finding their way, we said. Building their life. But over time, their visits became obligations. You could see it in how Jordan stood, always on the edge of his seat, checking his phone. Danielle stayed glued to hers. She once texted during dinner while Marjorie talked about her dahlias. When I asked her a question, she didn't look up. Just said, like I wasn't even there. Jordan didn't say anything. Just kept eating. Then came the little digs. Danielle once told Marjorie, "You should try decorating with neutrals, it makes small spaces feel less cramped." Our living room wasn't small. It was just lived in. Filled with memories. Not gray walls and fake succulents. At first, Marjorie laughed these comments off. But she started changing things. Boxed up her floral curtains. Bought white dishware. Swapped out the sunflower wreath on the door for a plain wooden one. "Just updating a little," she'd say. But I knew it wasn't her idea. One Thanksgiving, Jordan brought a bottle of wine. Danielle handed it to me and said, "Here. It's a Bordeaux. You probably haven't had one before." I didn't even know how to respond. Marjorie quickly chimed in, "Thank you, dear, that's very kind." The moment passed, but it stuck to me like a splinter. When I took Jordan aside later and told him that comment wasn't necessary, he laughed. "Don't take everything so seriously, Dad. She's just being playful." But it didn't feel playful. It felt pointed. Money started to come up more often. Not directly, but in ways that made me uncomfortable. Jordan would say things like, "If you ever need help managing the property, I could take it off your hands." Or, "You two should consider downsizing, that house is way too much to maintain." One time, he even said, "You could rent it out, live in a condo, and just enjoy your golden years." I'd built that house with my bare hands. Every plank, every tile. Downsizing felt like tearing pages out of a book you hadn't finished reading. When I told Marjorie, she looked at me for a long time and said, "He's not trying to hurt us. He just sees the world differently." That was always her way, giving the benefit of the doubt. But there were other things. When Marjorie got sick, the changes became harder to ignore. Danielle stopped visiting altogether. Said hospitals made her uncomfortable. Jordan came, but only for short spurts, always checking his watch, saying Emily had rehearsals or that he had a meeting. One night, after a long day at the hospital, I found Danielle in our kitchen. She'd let herself in using the spare key we kept in the shed. She was measuring the windows. When I asked her what she was doing, she said, "Just thinking about where we'd put a breakfast nook when we move in. This kitchen has potential." No shame. No hesitation. I stood there, speechless. Marjorie was upstairs, asleep with tubes in her arm, and Danielle was making renovation plans. When I told Jordan about it later, he chuckled like it was cute. "She's just excited, Dad. Don't take it the wrong way." That was the moment something cracked in me. Just a hairline fracture, not enough to break. Not yet. Then came the time Jordan snapped at me during dinner. I had asked Emily how school was going, and she said she missed spending weekends with us. Jordan cut in sharply, "Dad, don't put her in the middle of this." I didn't understand what he meant. I hadn't said anything about them. But he acted like I was manipulating her. Emily went quiet. Marjorie looked down at her plate. Danielle didn't say a word. That night, after they left, Marjorie said, "I think we've become guests in our own lives." I didn't know what to say. I felt it too. But we didn't confront him. Not yet. I kept thinking if I stayed patient, if I gave them room, things would go back to how they were. That Jordan, our Jordan, was still in there somewhere. I told myself love was stronger than hurt. I didn't know how wrong I was. It was Marjorie's 70th birthday. We had a small gathering, just family, a few old neighbors, and Ruth from across the street who always brought her famous pecan pie. Marjorie looked tired, but happy. I'd spent the whole morning stringing up lights in the backyard and digging out her favorite yellow tablecloth, the one with little sunflowers stitched along the edge. She always said it made everything feel like summer, even when it wasn't. We'd just finished dinner when Jordan raised his glass. I thought maybe he was going to toast his mother. But instead, he turned to me and said, "So Dad, when are you planning to update the will?" There was a pause, just long enough for every chair to creak slightly as heads turned. Marjorie froze. He chuckled. "I mean, not to be morbid, but you've got a lot of equity in that place. It'd be smart to get things organized." Danielle laughed too, the way people do when they think they're being edgy. "We were actually talking about that the other night," she added. "Just thinking ahead." I looked at Marjorie, her face pale and forced into a tight smile. She reached for her water glass, hand trembling slightly. I stood up slowly. "Not tonight," I said, my voice lower than usual. "This isn't the time." Jordan shrugged. All right, I was just joking." But he wasn't. I knew that now. After everyone left, I helped Marjorie to bed. She sat at the edge of the mattress, staring at her slippers like she couldn't remember how to put them on. "He wouldn't have said that if he thought of this house as ours," she whispered. I knelt beside her and took her hand. He was out of line. She nodded but didn't say anything for a while. Then, just before she lay down, she said, "Promise me something, Ed." "Anything." If anything happens to me before you, don't let them turn this place into a transaction. This was our life. Don't let it be reduced to square footage. I promise, I said. And I meant it. But the worst hadn't happened yet. A few weeks later, Marjorie was admitted to the hospital again. Her breathing had worsened, and the doctors said the cancer was moving faster than they expected. I stayed by her side every day. I brought her books, played her favorite music, old hymns and Johnny Mathis. She liked when I read aloud. Said my voice calmed her. Jordan visited once during that stay. He stood at the foot of her bed and talked mostly about work. Danielle didn't come. Hospitals make her uneasy, he said. When Marjorie asked about Emily, Jordan said she was too busy to visit. Marjorie smiled anyway, but I saw it in her eyes, that little flicker of heartbreak she tried to hide. 2 days before she passed, she squeezed my hand and said, "I'm tired, Ed. I think I'm ready." I told her I wasn't. She smiled faintly. "You'll find your way. Just make sure the house goes to someone who sees it." Those were her last clear words to me. She passed quietly that night. Jordan wasn't there. He showed up the next morning, dry-eyed and dressed like he was heading to a business lunch. He gave me a side hug, like a coworker would, and said, "Let me know when you're ready to go over things. I've got some ideas about the house." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Then came the funeral. It was simple, just like she wanted. No big speeches. Just music, flowers, and a gathering at the gravesite. As they lowered her casket into the ground, I felt like the earth had opened up inside me. My knees nearly buckled. And that's when he leaned in, as if offering a condolence, and whispered, "Hand me the keys now, Dad." I didn't move. Didn't even look at him. I just stared at the dirt, freshly turned. He said it like he was settling a deal. Like this, all of this, was just paperwork. After the service, people offered their sympathies. Ruth hugged me and slipped a note into my hand. "Call me if you need anything," it said, in her neat cursive. Jordan was already talking to Danielle near the car. I saw them looking at the house from across the lawn, like it was already theirs. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, our living room, surrounded by photos of a life they clearly didn't value. I looked at Marjorie's knitting basket, still beside the recliner. The Afghan she was making for Emily still half-finished. The scent of lavender from her dresser upstairs drifting faintly down the stairs. And all I could think about was that whisper. "Hand me the keys." It wasn't grief talking. It wasn't heat of the moment. It was planned. He'd waited until she was gone to make his move. He thought I was weak. Alone. He thought I'd just give him what he wanted. He was wrong. A week after the funeral, I found a real estate brochure in Jordan's car. He'd left it in the driveway while he ran in to check on me. I stepped out to get the mail, and there it was, glossy pages flapping in the wind on the passenger seat, like they were begging to be found. It wasn't just any brochure. It was from a high-end agency, the kind that sells homes with words like historic charm and investment opportunity. My house, the one I built, was circled on a map with handwritten notes in the margins. Things like tear-down shed, open concept kitchen, and potential to flip. That was when I knew. This wasn't about grief. It never was. Jordan hadn't come to check on me, he came to check on his timeline. Later that same day, I overheard him in the kitchen talking to Danielle on the phone. He didn't know I was in the hallway, standing just around the corner. "She's gone, babe. It's just Dad now. It won't take long. He's not going to put up a fight." There was a pause, then laughter. Her laughter. "We'll have the place listed by next month, tops." It's what she would have wanted anyway. No. It wasn't. Marjorie would have wanted her garden to stay. She would have wanted the house filled with life, not stripped down and sold off. She used to say, "A home is not a trophy. It's a story." And they were planning to erase every page. That night, I sat in her sewing room. Her reading glasses still rested on the side table, open to the last book she was reading, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. I hadn't touched anything in there. It still smelled like her. Faint lavender, mixed with old wood and something warm, something human. I opened the bottom drawer of her desk and found the envelope she'd tucked there months earlier, labeled in her handwriting, "For Edward, if I go first." Inside was a letter. "My love, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I know how much this house means to you, to us. I know they've changed. I've seen it in their eyes, in how quickly they move past our stories, how little they sit with us anymore. But I also know you. You won't fight for yourself. But promise me you'll fight for what we built. This house is not just wood and brick. It's everything we survived. It's us. Do what you must. I trust you." I cried, silently. Not the loud, cinematic kind of crying. The real kind, where your chest tightens, and you sit completely still because if you move, you'll fall apart. The next morning, I called the lawyer who helped us with our original will. Roger Matthews. Old friend. Vietnam buddy. The kind of man who still believed in handshakes and keeping your word. "I think they're trying to take the house," I said, voice cracking more than I wanted. Roger sighed. "You're not the first parent this has happened to, Ed. I've seen a lot of kids think inheritance is owed, like it's a prize for outlasting their parents." He invited me to come by that week. In the meantime, I started paying closer attention. Jordan dropped by more often, always asking odd questions. "You still paying utilities yourself? Got a home alarm set up yet? Mind if I take some pictures for insurance purposes?" He was circling, waiting for weakness. Danielle never came inside anymore. She sat in the car with the engine running, texting, scrolling, sunglasses on like she was too important to get out. Once, she leaned out the window and said, "If you need help packing stuff up, we can hire movers." I smiled, calmly. "That won't be necessary." Her lips tightened. She rolled up the window without another word. It all became clearer. This was a scheme, something they'd talked about for months, maybe longer. They'd written me off already, not even waiting for my body to catch up with their plans. And it hurt, not just because of what they were doing, but because of how little it seemed to cost them. Jordan, my son, who used to build forts with me in the backyard and fall asleep on my chest watching ball games, now saw me as an obstacle. Not a father. Not a grieving husband. Just a man in the way. That night, I dreamed of Marjorie. She was standing in the garden, humming to herself, hands in the dirt. When I walked toward her, she turned, smiling, and said, "It's time, Ed. You know what to do." I woke up with her voice still in my ears. And I knew. Speech balloon. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. The morning I decided to confront Jordan, I didn't wake up angry. I woke up tired. Tired of being polite while they planned around me like I was already dead. Tired of walking through my own home and seeing it through their eyes, as a transaction, a future remodel, a number on a listing sheet. Tired of watching Marjorie's legacy be measured in countertops and square footage. I didn't slam doors. I didn't shout. I just brewed a pot of coffee, poured it into 2 mugs, and waited by the kitchen window for him to arrive, like he always did now, uninvited, every few days. He showed up at 10:13 a.m. Right on cue. "Hey, Dad," he said, stepping through the front door like he owned the place. He didn't even knock. "Danielle's got a guy who wants to come by and look at the layout this weekend. He's flipping a place 2 towns over, big money in this area right now." I handed him the mug. Sit. He blinked. Sure. We sat across from each other at the table. The same table where he used to sit and do his homework. The one Marjorie insisted we never replace because it had history in the scratches. I folded my hands and looked him dead in the eye. I know what you've been doing. He tilted his head like he didn't understand. What do you mean? I found the brochure. I heard your phone call. And I saw Danielle measuring the windows. You're not hiding anything, Jordan. You're just assuming I'm too weak or too broken to push back. He scoffed, leaning back. Dad, come on. You're getting worked up over nothing. We're just trying to help you plan. No, I interrupted. You're trying to take. The silence hung thick between us. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd feel shame. But then he smirked. You're being dramatic. You think you can handle this place by yourself? It's too much. You can't even keep up with the garden. Danielle and I are just stepping in before it falls apart. I stared at him, not with anger, but with the kind of disappointment that hollows you out. You didn't even wait a week after your mother passed, I said. You stood over her grave and asked me for the keys. He shifted in his seat. Look, if we're being honest, Mom probably would have wanted us to have it. She was practical. I leaned forward. She asked me to protect this house from exactly this. She knew. She saw you changing long before I did. His face hardened. So what? You're just going to sit in this place until you die and let it rot? I stood up, calmly. I'm not discussing this with you again. But know this, you don't get to decide how this ends. He laughed under his breath. You don't have a plan, Dad. You don't have the energy. But I did. I may have been old. I may have been grieving. But I wasn't stupid. And I wasn't alone, either. Later that afternoon, Ruth from across the street stopped by with a casserole. She always brought food when she knew I needed to think. You look like you've had a morning, she said, setting the dish down on the counter. I told him, I said. She nodded, like she'd been waiting for that. And? He thinks I won't do anything. Thinks I'm just a sad old man who'll hand over the keys eventually. Ruth sat down at the table and folded her hands. You planning to let him be right? I looked out the window at Marjorie's roses, still blooming, still stubborn. No, I said. Not anymore. The next day, I went to see Roger again. We talked for nearly 2 hours. I laid out everything, the conversations, the planning behind my back, the pressure. And the promise I made to Marjorie. Roger leaned back in his chair and said, You've got every right to do whatever you want with your property. But if you want this to stick, if you want it airtight, we do it now, and we do it right. So we did. I gave him the old will. He drew up a new one. Jordan was removed. Completely. The house, instead, would go to a women's shelter that Marjorie donated to for years. I even added a clause. If anyone contested the will, everything, the house, the savings, the insurance, would be redirected to a veterans relief fund. If they tried to fight it, they'd lose everything. Walking out of that office, I didn't feel victorious. I felt like I'd just closed a door I never wanted to open. But it was the right one. That evening, I sat on the porch with the paperwork in my lap, watching the sky shift from orange to deep purple. I could almost hear Marjorie's voice. You did good, Ed. I closed my eyes and whispered, It's not over yet. But I was no longer afraid of how it would end. Roger had a strong handshake, the kind that told you he still mowed his own lawn and didn't believe in shortcuts. He looked older than I remembered. His hair had thinned, and the lines around his eyes had deepened since Marjorie and I last saw him, maybe 7 or 8 years back when we updated our will together. Ed, he said, standing when I walked into his office. "Sit. I heard about Marjorie. I'm real sorry." "Thank you," I replied. My voice cracked, and I hated that it did. I cleared my throat. "She would have wanted me to come here." "I reckon she would have," Roger said gently. We talked about everything: Jordan's sudden interest in the house, Danielle's designs on the property, the way they had begun treating the home like it was already theirs. I told him about Marjorie's letter, her request, and the way I'd heard them scheming in my own kitchen. Roger nodded throughout, taking notes with a heavy fountain pen. "I've seen this before. More often than you'd think. Kids looking at inheritance like a bonus round. It's not about love. It's about entitlement." He slid a blank form across the desk. "Tell me exactly what you want, and I'll make sure it sticks." It felt surreal. I'd always believed a parent's will was about passing down love, legacy. I never thought I'd be sitting here trying to keep something from my own child. "I want the house to go to the Morning Light Shelter," I said. "Marjorie supported them for years. Volunteered every Thanksgiving she was able. She believed in giving women a second chance." "Good choice," Roger said. "They'll put it to real use." I took a breath. I want Jordan completely removed. No partial claims, no joint ownership, nothing. And if he contests? I looked Roger in the eye. "Then everything, house, accounts, even the car, goes to the Veterans Relief Fund." Roger smiled faintly. "You want ironclad?" "That's ironclad." We spent the next 2 hours going through every detail. I brought old documents, copies of insurance, Marjorie's death certificate. Roger's secretary notarized the signature while I stared out the window, the pen in my hand feeling heavier than it should have. When I finally signed the new will, something shifted in me. Guilt, maybe. Or relief. Or both. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. But peace, I realized, sometimes meant closing doors, even on your own blood. Roger slipped the final copy into a folder and handed it to me. "You don't owe anyone an explanation, Ed. But if you decide to tell him, I'd do it on your terms. Not his." "I won't tell him yet," I said. "He thinks I'm still just grieving. Let him believe that a while longer." Walking out of that office, I felt lighter. Not happy, not even close, but in control for the first time in weeks. At home, I opened the file again and read every word. I placed the will in the fireproof box Marjorie and I had kept in the hall closet, right beneath our wedding album. Then I poured myself a small glass of bourbon and sat in her chair, the one she always used when sewing or reading. The house was quiet. Just the ticking of the wall clock and the faint hum of the fridge. I ran my fingers over the armrest of her chair and whispered, "I kept my promise." The next day, Jordan showed up again. He didn't even knock. "I found a guy who can get us top dollar," he said, walking in like it was his name on the deed. "Flippers are paying a premium for places with land. We'll just need to do a few upgrades. Paint, new fixtures, maybe tear down that old shed out back." He walked through the living room, tapping on walls like he was inspecting inventory. "Also, Danielle wants to put in an island in the kitchen. Said it's a must-have." I followed behind him, watching the way his eyes darted, not lingering on any of the photographs or the things Marjorie kept for decades. Just scanning, like a buyer, not a son. He turned back to me. "We'll need you out before October if we want to hit the market right." I didn't blink. "Jordan," I said, slowly, "you don't own this house." He smirked. "Not yet. But it's coming. You can't stay here forever." I smiled back, calm. "I'm not planning to." He seemed confused, but I didn't explain. Let him stay confused. That night, I took down the birdhouse he and I built when he was 10. It hung from the maple tree in the backyard, slightly crooked but still sturdy. I dusted it off, cleaned out the nest inside, and placed it gently in the garage. Some memories I couldn't throw away. But others? I was ready to let go. The envelope was thick, official looking. It had been slid under my front door, no knock, no bell. Just there, waiting, like a snake coiled in silence. I bent slowly to pick it up, knees aching worse than usual. The return address on the top left corner read, Oak Hollow Property Solutions. Inside were printed documents, glossy pages, floor plans, and a projected renovation timeline. At the top, in bold, preliminary listing and estimate, 437 Marigold Lane. My address. My home. I stared at the page for a long while, rereading each word like it might change if I squinted. They weren't just listing ideas, they were acting like the house was already theirs. Square footage, zoning potential, flipping margins. They even had a section labeled Post-Occupancy Cleanup. Like I was the mess they needed to clean up. I called Jordan. He didn't answer. I called again. On the third ring, he picked up with a casual, "Hey, Dad. Do you have anything you'd like to tell me?" I asked, keeping my voice level. There was a pause. About what? The packet you had delivered. You didn't even knock, Jordan. You just slid it under my door like some eviction notice. He sighed. Dad, come on. It's just planning ahead. We have to move fast if we want a good return. You're talking about return on investment like this is a stock, not your mother's home. It's not just hers, he snapped. You're alone now. You're what, 74? You don't need all that space. And Danielle and I are ready to grow. We're your family too. No, I said, voice low. You're not acting like family. You're acting like opportunists. Another pause. Then, with no hint of remorse, he said, look, it's going to happen either way. You might as well make it easy. I hung up without another word. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I went into Marjorie's sewing room, took out the blue file folder with the new will, and added the renovation brochure on top. A record. A receipt of his betrayal. Then I packed a small duffel, just enough for a couple nights, and put it in the truck. I drove to Roger's house. He wasn't expecting me, but when he opened the door, he just nodded and stepped aside like he already knew. I spent that night in his guest room, laying awake with my eyes fixed on the ceiling, counting every betrayal in reverse order. Danielle's coldness. Jordan's laughter at the funeral. The jokes at Marjorie's birthday. The silence during her final days. By sunrise, my heart had hardened in a way I didn't know was possible. Not out of hatred, I didn't hate my son. But I no longer trusted him with a single piece of what we'd built. That day, I called a local realtor myself. A quiet woman named Marla, recommended by Ruth. She came by that afternoon, respectful and soft-spoken, the kind of person who asked before touching anything. She didn't pitch me numbers. Didn't throw around words like flip or upgrade. She walked through the house slowly, like she understood that it was more than square footage. I can list it, she said. Privately. Quietly. I know a few buyers who would honor what this place is. Good, I said. But one condition, the proceeds go directly to Morning Light Shelter. Not a cent to my son. She blinked, surprised. Are you sure? I handed her the file. Completely. We signed the paperwork at the dining room table. The same one where Jordan once built a science project with baking soda volcanoes. Where Marjorie used to lay out her puzzles on lazy Sunday afternoons. Where we'd sat for decades, in love, in loss, in life. When Marla left, I stood at the door and watched her drive away, the papers tucked under her arm like the final chapters of a long, beautiful book. I stayed up late that night, walking the house in silence. room by room. The kitchen still smelled like Marjorie's lavender oil. Her apron hung behind the pantry door, faded and soft. I folded it gently and packed it in a box marked, "Keep." I found Emily's crayon drawing still taped to the hallway wall. A house with a red roof and stick figure people labeled Papa and Nana. I took a photo of it with my phone, then carefully removed the paper and placed it between the pages of Marjorie's Bible. I didn't touch Jordan's old room. It was already empty in every way that mattered. By dawn, everything was ready. I placed a single key in an envelope with Marla's name on it. Then I drove out to the shelter, not to tell them yet, not to make a scene, just to sit in the parking lot, watching from a distance. Women stepped in and out of the building with tired faces and heavy shoulders, but there was something steady there. Something Marjorie believed in. Second chances. A safe place to land. I smiled. She would have loved this. She would have understood. Danielle's parents were celebrating their 40th anniversary with a garden party, white tents, linen napkins, little appetizers on toothpicks. The whole thing looked like a magazine spread. Jordan invited me out of obligation, I'm sure, not kindness. "We've got a lot of the family coming," he said over the phone. "Would be good for you to show face. Might lift your spirits." Lift my spirits. That was rich. I said I'd think about it. What I didn't tell him was that I'd already spoken to Marla. The house was under contract. Not a flipper. Not a developer. A family, young, modest, the wife worked part-time at the Morning Light shelter. When she walked through the place, she touched the walls gently, like she understood. It was settled. The house was sold. The papers were signed. The transfer was scheduled for the end of the week. And Jordan still had no idea. So yes, I decided I'd go to that party. I put on my best slacks, the navy blazer Marjorie bought me for church. I polished my shoes, combed my thinning hair, and folded the documents neatly into a manila envelope. By the time I arrived, the music was playing, and people were milling around with champagne flutes, laughing about things that didn't matter. I saw Danielle across the yard in a tight white dress, already 3 glasses deep. Jordan was by the grill, flipping steaks like he was king of the block. He didn't see me at first. Ruth did. She gave me a nod from across the yard, a quiet kind of encouragement. When Jordan finally spotted me, he smiled like a politician. "Hey, you made it." I was starting to think. "Let's talk," I said, cutting him off. I held up the envelope. His smile faltered. "Now? Can't it wait until?" "No," I said, calm and firm. "It can't." We walked to the side of the house, behind the garage. The music was muffled here, just the faint hum of chatter in the background. I handed him the envelope. "What's this?" "Your inheritance," I said. "Or rather, what's left of it." He opened it and started flipping through the documents. First confusion. Then disbelief. Then anger, sharp and sudden. "What the hell is this? You sold the house?" "Yes." "To who?" "To someone who deserves it." "You don't get to do that," he snapped, voice rising. "That house is supposed to stay in the family. That's Mom's house." "Don't you dare," I said, my voice suddenly cold. "Don't use her name to justify your greed." People were starting to notice. Heads turned. The hum of conversation dipped. Jordan's face flushed. "You're not thinking clearly. You've been unstable since Mom passed." "I've never been clearer," I said. "You treated her death like a finish line. Like the moment she was gone, you could start picking through the remains." He looked around, lowering his voice. "You're making a scene." I leaned in, voice steady. "And you made a plan. Behind my back. While I was burying my wife." His eyes darted to the crowd, then back to me. You had no right. I had every right. I built that house. Every beam, every nail. I carried Marjorie across that threshold. We raised you there. And you wanted to gut it. Sell it. Strip it down and flip it like it was a dead asset. It was an asset, he burst out. You don't need it anymore. You're old and alone. That silence, it was instant. Conversation stopped. Every head turned now. Even Danielle froze, her glass halfway to her lips. I looked at him, heart calm for the first time in weeks. No, I said. I'm not alone. I just stopped surrounding myself with people who only love me when there's something to gain. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and before you think about contesting the will, I said, loud enough for a few nearby guests to hear, just know if you do, every penny goes to a veterans charity. So go ahead. Try me. I walked away without another word. No one stopped me. When I reached the car, I let out a slow breath I didn't know I was holding. My hands were steady. My spine straight. I felt something I hadn't felt since the day Marjorie smiled at me from across that foundation back in 1979. Pride. I didn't burn bridges. I didn't raise my voice. I simply took back what was mine, and hers. And for the first time since the funeral, I slept through the night without waking once. Brain, do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The days after the party were quiet, not peaceful, not yet, but quiet in a way that made the air feel heavier than usual. Like the world had paused, holding its breath to see what I'd do next. Jordan didn't call. Danielle didn't text. And for once, I didn't wonder why. The house felt different now, almost lighter. Not because it had changed, but because I had. There was no more pretending. No more waiting for the phone to ring or the door to creak open with a reluctant visit. No more hoping for warmth that had long since turned cold. The papers were signed. The new owners would take over in just a few days. I spent my final mornings there packing slowly, not rushing, not grieving, just saying goodbye on my terms. I wrapped Marjorie's tea set in old dish towels, carefully labeling the box, "Keep, Fragile." I found her wedding shoes tucked in the back of the closet, still smelling faintly of cedar and lavender. I held them longer than I meant to. Every object held a memory, but none of them held me. The neighbors began to hear whispers. Oak Hollow's a small town, news travels on the backs of glances and garden fences. Some folks nodded at me a little longer at the grocery store. Others avoided eye contact altogether. Ruth, bless her, dropped by every other day with food I didn't need but couldn't turn down. On Tuesday morning, she brought cinnamon rolls and sat on the porch beside me, hands folded neatly in her lap. Heard about what happened at the party, she said gently, eyes fixed on the rose bushes. Takes guts to do what you did. I didn't feel brave, I said. You don't have to feel it to be it. We sat in silence for a while, watching a hummingbird flit between blossoms. Then she turned to me. You planning to stay in town? For now, I replied. Found a small place. Not far from here. Close enough to walk to the park. Just big enough for one. She nodded, then added, You're not really alone, you know. I looked at her, surprised. People notice when a man holds his ground, she said. Even if they don't say it. I didn't respond. But I let her words settle. That afternoon, I took a walk through the woods behind the property. Marjorie and I used to go there every fall, crunching through leaves, arm in arm, watching the maples turn to fire. I found our old bench still standing beneath the big elm, weathered but strong. I sat for over an hour, letting the wind carry thoughts I couldn't quite put into words. When I got home, I found a letter waiting for me. It was tucked beneath the front door mat, folded paper, no envelope. Written in pencil. Papa, I heard about the house. I hope you're okay. I miss you. Mommy says I can't visit, but I'm going to try. Love, Emily. My throat tightened. Not with regret, with something softer, something sad but good. She hadn't forgotten me. The next day, I packed the last of my boxes and loaded them into the truck. I walked through the house one last time. I didn't linger in every room. Just the kitchen, where Marjorie used to dance when the radio played her favorite Sam Cooke songs. The living room, where Jordan took his first steps. The hallway, where our wedding photo had hung for decades. Then I turned off the lights, locked the door, and left the key in the mailbox for Marla. I moved into the cabin that evening. It was small, one bedroom, a screened-in porch, a fireplace I hadn't used yet. But it was mine. No history heavy on its walls. No ghosts in the corners. Just space to breathe. The next morning, I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee and watched the sunrise over the treeline. It wasn't the same view I'd had for 40 years, but it was beautiful in its own way. Quiet. New. That day, I started writing in a notebook Marjorie had once given me for our anniversary. The cover was leather, soft and worn, with the words, "For your stories," pressed in gold. I wasn't sure if I was writing a letter to her, or to myself, or maybe to Emily. Maybe to the man I used to be. I wrote about building the house. About falling in love. About losing and keeping promises. About the moment I realized love doesn't always come back the way you gave it, and that sometimes, it doesn't come back at all. And still, you keep going. You keep building something that matters. 2 weeks passed. The quiet had settled into something comforting by then, not silence that weighed, but silence that healed. I spent my mornings with a cup of black coffee, listening to the birds and scribbling thoughts in that notebook. No TV. No phone buzzing. Just the sound of a man finally learning how to breathe on his own. Then one morning, Emily showed up. I was sitting on the porch, half reading an old Louis L'Amour novel, when I heard the crunch of gravel and looked up to see her standing there, hands clasped behind her back, hair pulled into a messy ponytail, wearing a sweatshirt that hung down to her knees. She looked nervous. Like she thought she might get in trouble just for being there. "Hi, Papa." I stood, my voice catching. "Emily." "I ran away," she said, though there was no fear in her voice. "But not far. I told Dad I was at my friend Clara's. I used her bike." "How did you find me?" I asked Miss Ruth. "She said you might need company." I laughed softly and opened my arms. She stepped in, hugging me tightly around the waist. We sat on the porch for an hour. She told me things, about school, about how Danielle banned her from mentioning Nana's name in the house. About how Jordan told her Papa needs space and isn't feeling well. She never believed it. "I knew you weren't sick," she said. "Just sad." "You're a smart girl," I whispered. "Mom says I shouldn't call this place home," she said, glancing around the porch. "But it feels like it could be." That's when the idea started forming. A flicker at first, just a thought. But it grew legs quickly. I wasn't done building things. Not yet. Later that afternoon, I called Roger. Asked him to meet me for lunch at the diner just outside town. We ate turkey sandwiches and talked about taxes and zoning laws like two old-timers planning something wild. "I want to turn the cabin into something useful," I told him. "Not just a place to sleep. A place to help." He raised an eyebrow. "Help who?" "Veterans. Widowers. People like me. People who need a few quiet days off the grid. A place to think. Heal." He leaned back in his seat and grinned. "Ed, you always did think better with a hammer in your hand." Next, I reached out to the local VFW post. I told them what I was thinking, opening the cabin up on weekends for any vet who needed a break, a bed, or just a place to be quiet without questions. One of the organizers, a woman named Teresa, hugged me after I explained it. "You don't know how many people need exactly that," she said. Word spread quickly. Ruth brought by a few extra quilts. "From Marjorie's pattern," she said. "Figured you'd want that touch." A man from the hardware store, Dennis, whose father served with mine in Korea, offered lumber at a discount. "Just tell me what you need," he said. Within a week, the place started transforming. I built shelves. Painted the walls a soft, welcoming gray. Cleared the small shed out back and turned it into a tiny bunk room with 2 cots and a heater. I hung a sign on the porch made from salvaged barn wood, "Marjorie's Rest." Emily came by every few days to help. She swept, made beds, organized books. "Can I stay here sometime?" she asked. "Always," I said. "This will always be a place for you." One afternoon, I found her on the porch drawing in her sketchbook. She held it up. It was a picture of the cabin, with little hearts around it and the words, "Papa's Place of Peace." That's what this had become. Not just a plan, but a purpose. And through it all, I felt Marjorie. In the swing of the hammer. In the smell of the wood. In the way the light filtered through the trees and hit the porch at dusk, the very same light she used to sit in with her tea and say, "This world can still be beautiful, Ed. Even after all it takes." She was right. It started slowly, like most good things do. The first visitor came on a Friday, a man named Reggie, sent by Teresa from the VFW. Vietnam vet. Thin as a rail, with shoulders that sagged like he'd been carrying more than just age. He stepped onto the porch with a small duffel bag and said, "Heard you had a quiet place." I nodded. "I do. Welcome to Marjorie's Rest." He stayed 2 nights. Said almost nothing the entire time, just sat by the fireplace, drinking coffee and staring into the flames. On Sunday, before he left, he said, "First time I slept through the night in years." Then came Marvin, a Gulf War mechanic with burned scars up one arm and a laugh so loud it made the walls rattle. He fixed the broken fence without being asked. Couldn't just sit around and do nothing, he said. He left behind a box of tools, saying, "Just in case someone else needs them." A woman named Lenora came next. Widow. Her husband was a Marine. She brought a box of old books and read in the swing for hours, legs tucked under her like a girl. The cabin became what I never expected, not just a retreat, but a haven. People brought what they had, tools, blankets, stories, silence. They didn't take. They added. And in doing so, they reminded me what family could be. Emily helped me keep track of everything. She made a sign-in notebook with colored tabs for each guest. She labeled the shelves with hand-drawn signs, books, games, coffee and peace. One shelf was just for puzzles, because Marjorie had loved them. "I think Nana would like this," she said one evening as we lit the fireplace. "She'd love it," I said. "She'd probably have baked something for everyone by now." Emily laughed. "You're lucky she didn't know about social media. She'd have gone viral." We had regular visitors after that. Some came just once. Others returned monthly. A few stayed longer, not because they were lost, but because they finally felt found. And through all of it, I never heard from Jordan. Not a call. Not a letter. But I saw Danielle once, at the farmer's market, of all places. She walked past me like I was a ghost, clutching organic strawberries and looking through me like I was already in the ground. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I had a new life now, not built on shared DNA, but shared heart. One Sunday afternoon, a knock came at the cabin door. It was raining lightly, the kind that makes everything smell clean. When I opened it, there stood a young couple, no older than 30, with a toddler bundled in yellow rain boots and a puffy jacket. "Are you Ed?" the woman asked. "I am. We bought your old house," she said, smiling. "Marla told us about what you did. We just wanted to say thank you." The man stepped forward. "We weren't sure how to say it, but, this place you built. It's not just beautiful. It feels like someone loved it. We're going to keep it that way." The toddler stepped onto the porch and handed me a single daisy, plucked from the edge of their yard. "For you," she said. I took it with trembling fingers. "Thank you," I whispered. When they left, I sat in Marjorie's old rocking chair and watched the rain, the daisy in a mason jar beside me. I felt her there again, in the kindness of strangers, in the soft steps of a child who didn't know me but still offered something bright. That night, Emily stayed over. She brought her schoolbooks and we made grilled cheese sandwiches. She fell asleep on the couch with a blanket over her and a novel half open on her chest. I didn't wake her. I just sat there watching her breathe, her face calm and free of all the noise her parents carried. That's when I realized, blood doesn't make a family. Kindness does. Loyalty does. Showing up when it matters, that makes a person yours. And I wasn't alone. Not anymore. It was a Tuesday, overcast, quiet, the kind of day where the sky feels undecided. I was chopping firewood out back when I heard tires crunching slowly down the gravel path. I figured it might be Ruth, or maybe one of the regulars bringing by extra supplies. But when I rounded the cabin, axe still in hand, I stopped cold. It was Jordan. He stepped out of a sleek black car, alone, wearing a jacket too expensive for the weather and eyes that looked older than I remembered. Not tired. Just worn in a way that happens when you realize too late you've pushed everyone too far. He didn't wave. Didn't smile. I set the axe down gently against the stump and walked toward the porch. "Wasn't expecting you," I said. He stood at the edge of the steps. "I had to see it." I nodded. "You drove all this way just to look?" "I heard what you did," he said, glancing at the hand-painted sign above the porch, "Marjorie's Rest." I said nothing. He shifted his weight, then looked out at the trees. "People are talking. Emily, she told me this place is full every weekend. Said she feels safer here than at home." "She's welcome anytime," I said. He nodded slowly. "I figured you hated me." "I don't," I said plainly. "I just don't trust you." Jordan looked down, his hands in his coat pockets. "Danielle's gone," he said after a beat. "Filed for divorce last month. Said I was emotionally unavailable." I didn't flinch. He sighed. "I deserve that." Still, I waited. After a long pause, he said, "I didn't come for money. I know that ship's sailed. I wanted to see what you built. I guess I needed to see why." I gestured to the swing. "Then sit. I'll make coffee." He hesitated. Then he followed. I brought 2 mugs out, set them on the side table, and sat across from him. The wind rustled the trees gently, the only sound between us for a while. He looked around the porch, the worn rocking chair, the woodpile, the potted plant Emily brought over last week. "It's nice," he said. "It's peaceful," I replied. We sat in silence again. Then he asked, "Do you hate who I became?" I took a long breath. "No," I said. "I think you let the world tell you what success meant. I think you stopped listening to your own compass. And I think when Mom died, you saw opportunity instead of loss. That's what hurt." He looked down again. "But hate you?" I shook my head. "No. I just learned to love you from a distance." He swallowed hard. I didn't realize how much she held us together. She was the center, I said. And when the center's gone, what's left is who you really are. Jordan stared into his coffee. I wasn't there at the end, he said. I should have been. Yes, I said. You should have. There was no comfort in the truth, but I gave it anyway. He didn't look like he wanted forgiveness, not really. He looked like a man trying to stand inside the ruins of something he thought would always be there. He looked around again, eyes scanning the porch. You named it after her, he said. I promised I would protect what we built. This was the only way I knew how. He nodded slowly. She'd like it here, he said. She's here, I said softly. He looked at me then, not as an old man to pity or persuade, but as his father. I don't expect things to go back to how they were, he said. But, if there's ever a day I could come back. Just to sit. Or help. I nodded once. You can come. But not as a son looking to inherit. As a man who wants to rebuild. He stood after that, leaving the coffee half finished. Thanks for not slamming the door. I already did, I said. Now I'm deciding whether to open it again. He gave a sad sort of smile, the kind you give when you know the work ahead is long, but you're finally ready to start it. As he got back in his car, I watched the taillights vanish down the road. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. But I felt settled. Later that evening, I wrote in my notebook again. A simple line. Today, the boy I raised visited the man I became. Maybe there'd be another visit. Maybe there wouldn't. But either way, I'd already built the kind of family worth keeping. Speech balloon. Would you have forgiven your son? Share your thoughts below. The ceremony was simple, just the way Marjorie would have liked it. No ribbon cutting, no speeches filled with buzzwords. Just people. Real people. Survivors. Helpers. Neighbors. A folding table covered with homemade cookies, a pitcher of lemonade, and a sign made by Emily that read, "Welcome to Marjorie's garden, a place to rest, a place to begin." The front lawn of my old house had never looked so alive. The young couple who bought it had turned the garden into something stunning. Marjorie's old rosebushes still framed the walkway, but now there were lavender beds, sunflowers as tall as the porch, and soft wood chips where grass used to be. A little bench sat beneath the magnolia tree, just where she used to read. They kept her bird feeder and filled it weekly. Inside, they'd kept much of the original charm, the kitchen tile we chose together, the windows Jordan once called outdated, the creaky stair that made the house feel honest. But they added touches of their own, framed poems, shelves of books, soft blankets on every couch. And on the living room wall, above the fireplace, hung a plaque. This home was built with love, restored with purpose, and given back to the world in honor of Marjorie Bennett, mother, neighbor, and believer in second chances. I stood there with Emily, hand in hand, taking it all in. The Morning Light Shelter had opened a new program in partnership with the family, weekend retreats for women transitioning out of hardship. A place to breathe. To plan. To remember what safety feels like. They called it Marjorie's house. It felt right. After the small gathering, I stepped onto the back porch, the same one where Marjorie once stood, arms crossed, smiling as I botched another attempt at hanging wind chimes straight. I could almost see her there again. Hair pinned back, apron still dusted with flour. Watching the kids run through the yard. Laughing. Whole. I pulled the letter from my pocket. I'd written it the night before, not for anyone else, just for her. My Marjorie. You asked me to protect this place. And I did, the only way I knew how, by letting it go to hands that would love it the way we did. I'm sorry it came to that. I'm sorry your son forgot the soil he grew from. But I hope you see what's blooming now. I hope you hear the laughter in the hallways again. The soft voices of women learning to trust. The quiet prayers whispered from the porch swing. You would have liked the couple who lives here. They don't fill the house with noise, they fill it with kindness. Emily's doing well. She helps at the cabin most weekends. She tells me she feels close to you when she's there. I think she has your heart, Marge. The kind that holds others even when it's breaking. As for me, I'm okay. I miss you. Every day. But I'm not lost. I've got purpose again. I've got people who sit at my table because they want to, not because they're entitled to a seat. I've got a fire that still burns, even if it flickers sometimes. And I've kept the birdhouse Jordan and I built. It hangs outside the cabin now. A little crooked, still. Just like we left it. You'd be proud. I hope you are. With all my love. Ed. I folded the letter and tucked it into the shadow box hanging just inside the foyer. Inside the box was her garden gloves, a photo of us on the porch, and the original key to the house, now gilded in bronze. People stopped to look at it as they walked in. Some cried. Some smiled. I stepped outside and found Ruth waiting near the gate. She'd be so proud of you, she said. I hope so. I know so. Emily ran up then, beaming. The kids want you to read a story in the garden room before they leave. I looked down at her, her eyes filled with the same brightness Marjorie had in hers, and I nodded. Of course, I said. Let's go. She took my hand and pulled me inside, past the laughter, past the lives beginning again, past everything I thought I'd lost, and straight into everything I'd gained. Marjorie's house wasn't gone. It had simply changed hands. And in doing so, it lived again.